If they can see us.
There you go.
There we go. Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, December 6th, 2016. We'll open the meeting with the pledge to the flag. Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Yeah, press.
Present.
Here? I know. Yes, very quiet tonight.
Okay, the clock's running.
Okay.
Hey, adjourn.
So first on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of November 1st, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
One item on the agenda tonight, there are no people in the audience or cards for people who want to address it. So we'll go ahead and move to Zone Text Amendment ZC 1016-12395, application by the City of Daly City to amend regulations in the Daly City Municipal Code, Title 17 zoning related to residential parking provision, contiguous, modification to residential floor plans, accessory dwelling units, previously called second units, and other code revisions pertaining to development in residential neighborhoods. And Mike von Langhausen?
Thank you, Commissioner Edelman. This is a proposal, again, by the city itself to amend the residential regulations contained in the city's zoning ordinance. The item before you has actually gone before council committee a couple of times and was the subject of a city council study session back in May. So we've gone through some thought process with council on this, and the Planning Commission is now charged with reviewing what's been developed in regard to the regulation changes. So some of the justifications for what we're bringing to you tonight are a general plan implementation. When the city adopted its general plan in 2013, there were some ideas developed at that time for amendments that were necessary to the residential regulations. So implementing the general plan is one of the justifications. Compliance with state law, and this is specifically with regard to accessory dwelling units. The state in September, the state legislature adopted some preemptive a state law that preempts the city's law with regard to second units, and they call them accessory dwelling units now, and we're going to go into what those changes are, of course, in this presentation. We are codifying recent and longstanding city policies. So the city planning division operates under some policy guidance over the years. Those policies have amounted to a good number of policies, and we're codifying those. Closing loopholes, and also for the consistent review of projects, persons adding on to their homes, building new homes, these sorts of things. We want a consistent review of projects. And then lastly, we're attempting to address community concerns that have arisen lately with regard to the conversion of single-family homes to what are perceived to be apartments, as well as bulk and mass issues. And so those are some of the reasons that the revisions are before you tonight. This slide provides an overview of what we'll be taking a look at: accessory structures, fences, number of parking spaces required, second units, also now called accessory dwelling units. And again, those regulations are being changed in conformity with state law, as well as new regulations pertaining to front yard paving, internal integration, interior common open space, garage opening and parking space dimensions, residential design, secondary pedestrian entrances, trash and recyclable storage areas, as well as the city's wet bar allowance. So there's a lot of the attachment. Attachment A actually contains, of course, all the proposed revisions. We're not going to go through every single one of those. We assume that you've taken a look at those, and if you have any questions, you'll raise them. This time doesn't really permit for us to go through every single one, but we're going to kind of touch on the larger subject matter. The first is internal integration. So currently, the city has a policy that requires that when a person or homeowner, that is, proposes rooms downstairs, that the upstairs and the downstairs be connected via staircase. And this graphic provides a simple illustration of that. So we are proposing to codify that. One of the things that isn't on the slide that is noteworthy is that, and this sort of speaks to ensuring that three-story buildings are not being converted to apartments, is that in the proposed regulations, the access between the first and second floor would need to be at a different location than between the second and third floor. So person would need to be able to walk through the second floor to get to the third floor, because we've had situations where in a common stairwell, people have just put a door at each of the floors, and then we have a small apartment building. So we have introduced that as a regulation. No slide on that, but it's an important thing to note. We are proposing to codify some of the design requirements that we commonly impose on building additions and new houses. I won't go through every single one of these, but I'll paraphrase, so to speak. We do require that additions have matching material, roof pitch, roof material, things like this. So from time to time, people ask us, why do I have to do that? So now we'll have something in the code. In some instances, the city has, as a matter of fact, in all of our residential zones, there are 0 setbacks on the sides, but we do desire to carry the existing setback in a new addition. And so we're proposing a codification that the side yard setback for any new addition would match that of the existing home, which makes some sense to us. Recessing pedestrian entrances and garage entrances, 24 inches is a design requirement. These are the sorts of things that we're taking a look at when we're reviewing buildings. A 10-foot third-story recess would replace the existing 5-story recess to try and give additional articulation at the street. So these are residential design guidelines that we're proposing for codification in the zoning ordinance. Accessory structures. Presently, we allow accessory structures that are basically 15 feet tall. They're subject presently to a 10-foot rear yard, but no side yard setbacks. And what we're proposing is that the structures, that there be a clarification that in combination, all structures in the rear yard can't exceed 120 square feet. Because it's a policy, but it's something that we need to codify. So, and that's something that we need to do. As well as we're proposing that accessory structures be lowered to 10 feet in total height unless the accessory structure is proposed within the building setbacks and subject to the lot coverage. Then you could go up to 15 feet in height, and there would be an administrative design review that would occur at that point in time. Some of you may recall having seen use permits for accessory structures that you've reviewed. So that would be replaced by an administrative review. But the structures would need to adhere to the lot coverage and the building setback allowance. So we're sort of decreasing the allowable number of and size of accessory structures that don't have to comply with coverage and setbacks. But then on the other hand, we're streamlining the review of accessory structures that comply with where you could have built a building anyway. So that's sort of the logic here. And if there's any questions, just feel free to, you can interrupt and stop. So one of the things that the general plan identifies as a matter of policy that we need to take a look at is the provision of parking for residential additions and new home construction. And one of the areas that we decided, or the way that we've decided that we would regulate this is based on the square feet of the habitable area. Oftentimes, we get in a conversation or debate with people about what the different rooms of their home is. Sometimes they're exercise rooms or social rooms. And so we've just said total habitable area is going to be the way that we calculate square feet. And we've broken that into essentially chunks of square feet where 2, 3, 4, or 6 parking spaces are required. So the first level would be the provision of 2 parking spaces. So one of those could be in the driveway, and that would be for any new home or an addition resulting in the house being 1,500 square feet or less. So this would not affect people's ability to do rooms downstairs. In that case, you could not remove existing parking spaces for rooms downstairs. So this is only if you're adding on or building a new house, as is the case with the subsequent slides as well. So if you're adding on or building a new house between 1,500 and 2,000 square feet, we would require 3 parking spaces, but 1 could be in the driveway. Between 2,000 and 2,500 square feet, then we go to the 4 parking space requirement. 2 of the parking spaces can be in the driveway. And then if the habitable square feet is over 2,500 square feet, we would require 6 parking spaces. So these are intended for larger homes that are capable, and usually those larger homes are on lots that are capable of providing the 6 parking spaces. And the reason for this is that there have been fairly widespread concern in cities' neighborhoods about the lack of available parking. So this regulation here would, effectively require people to provide either more parking or build a smaller home. That's
That's the question.
Yeah.
I'm looking at these 1, 2, and 3, and as this segues into what you're going to talk about, would that be an area for refuge? See, I'm looking at like your barrels and things like that. This is just for habitable area. Yeah,
This
yeah,
is just
I
for
know.
parking, right?
But then you're going to have something later to talk about.
Like
okay,
trash storage.
Trash storage,
Yeah,
right, thank
yeah.
you.
Right, and it's one of the things we were also proposing to codify, which is an existing policy, is the dimension of both the garage door opening
Oh, good.
as well as the garage door, as well as the parking space dimension. So we're requiring that parking space dimension be centered on the back of the garage door. If it's a double wide space, it would be 17 feet wide, and if it's a parking space with walls on both sides, that the parking space dimension would be 10 feet. So the 10-foot, the centering on the back of the garage door is a policy right now that would be codified. So one of the areas that we're proposing a change in the regulations is to conform to state law. The general plan had actually given some direction to amend the city's second unit regulation based on providing fewer parking spaces for smaller accessory or second units, smaller second units. And so we, up until September of this year, we'd sort of operated under, we'd come up with some regulatory revisions to sort of comply with that line of thinking. But then the state legislature adopted new regulations for accessory dwelling units, and those significantly curtailed the city's ability to, for example, require additional parking. So current regulations require that the city conduct a density calculation to see if a second unit's even allowed in a certain neighborhood. And what this has effectively done is disallowed second units in areas where the lot sizes are 2,500 square feet while allowing them in other parts of the city. And so what we found in those areas is people just propose rooms downstairs with a wet bar or without one, and they have a second unit anyway. That is really the reality. And so that's one area that the state has said, come back to us and said you can't actually conduct density calculations. They're allowed on all the lots in the city. So there's a slide that follows that shows what the state's required. But currently we have a maximum floor area of 25% of the entire home, including the garage. The owner must live at the address, and that there's a certificate of registration required. So the state law and the proposed regulations that would conform to it would be that there would be no density calculation. So all lots are capable of having a second unit. that there would be no additional parking if the parcel is transit proximate. And the state doesn't have any guideline for what transit proximate means, but basically all of Daly City would be considered transit proximate, because we took a look at the map, and even if you just considered bus stops to be transit, it's basically the entire city.
So then, looking at the state thing, is every lot is gonna have to be, is capable of having a second unit.
That's true. Without,
And then, which means another car or something, and what do they expect the city to do with that?
they expect the city to comply with their law that
Wow.
can have a second unit. Mhm.
However, continuing on what Charlie just mentioned, they couldn't have a second unit in a current designated parking space, so it would have to be in a space that supports a second unit, correct?
That's right.
Replace
You
an
can't
existing-
replace existing parking spaces. That's the way we've interpreted the
Good,
law.
thank you.
The size of the unit would be limited to 50% of the existing living area in size. This is a little bit of a distinction because we have a limit that's 25% of the size of the entire home, including the garage. So it's a slightly larger allowance for the second unit. But in reality, what people do is they convert the rear half of their downstairs. That's what 99% of the time, that's what happens. And so we know that's, even though it's a slightly larger allowance, really not that material in Daly City. We have proposed that the access to the second unit be at the same side of the home as the primary entrance, unless it would cause trespass.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to preserve the privacy of the next door neighbor in that requirement, because usually what we see is the walk-up staircase, traditional walk-up staircase on the right side of the home. This is true in Westlake and in Saramani neighborhoods. So having the entrance on the same side of the home, we think is a good idea, unless it's infeasible, of course. The state law is requiring, and we've proposed that detached accessory dwelling units be allowed. So right now, detached accessory dwelling units are not permitted at all in Daly City. But they'd be limited to 1,500 square feet. But one of the important things to note here is that these would be subject to the lot coverage limitations. A lot of our lots are already, approaching the maxed out lot coverage. So don't know that this is really a super material thing in Daly City, but it is something that we must allow.
Mike, excuse me for asking, but, so 1,500 square feet additional unit, is that a additional living unit?
Mm-hmm. It would be.
Okay.
And it would be
So,
non-discretionary.
but that depends on the footprint of the lot.
What the ability to do this depends on the existing lot coverage.
Right.
So even if you're at 40% lot coverage, you've got to be able to, in that additional, assuming there's a 50% lot coverage
So we could
maximum.
assume some areas will be putting, I mean, if they wanted to and they had the 1,500 square
Okay.
foot, you're gonna have a second unit, so to
Okay.
speak, and
You still have to go through the process and the permitting.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
no, I understand that, so
Absolutely
there's a
would.
way to make sure,
Yeah.
okay.
It's, with regard to this, plumbing has to be run, electricity has to be run to that unit, so it's something that we have to allow. It's not something we expect a lot.
Okay.
We don't expect to see
I
this a
don't
lot.
think so.
On occasion, it will happen. We would retain the occupancy requirement that's currently required. We've proposed changing that the photo ID would be submitted at the time of the application for the second unit instead of just accepting utility bills. So that just makes it easier for us to administer. So that's accessory dwelling units in a nutshell. Again, this is proposed in conformance with state law. All cities in California have to comply with this. As a matter of fact, on January 1st, it becomes the law in California in all cities. So front yard paving is another area that we've tossed around, gone back and forth, and had some discussion with our council committee on. The current, the zoning ordinance currently states that contiguous paving may not be placed next to the driveway so that it could be used for parking. So over the years, we've sort of dealt with this in different ways. Currently, what we tell people to come to the counter if they want to pave their front lawn pave their front lawn, usually is a lawn, is that you can do that, but you need to provide something there, preferably a vertical barrier that makes it impossible to park a car on it. And so these are some examples of addresses where this regulation's been complied with. So they can't park a car on it. It's still
Yeah.
aesthetically, mean, not awful, but a couple more examples. The right one on the one on the right's a little better aesthetically.
Mhm.
The
What if the motorcycles on it?
so what we'd initially proposed and developed is that just not to allow front yard paving at all. Council committee considered this, thought, maybe we need to be allowing front yard paving instead. And if we're going to allow front yard paving, to allow people to actually park their car on it, instead of requiring this, for example, this fountain, you can't park a car on that. So we're allowing it, but then not allowing people to park on it. It seems a little counterintuitive in that regard. So the committee provided staff some direction to allow some front yard paving.
So then you'll have front yard paving.
You'll have front yard paving, but the reason why we prepared this slide is to show what we don't necessarily want. So this is complete front yard paving where people are parking off driveway. So it's not compliant with our current policy or the zoning ordinance. But it's not exactly what we want to see. So what we considered is, and what the committee has agreed in concept to, is requiring that 25% of the front yard area, and we have a graphic of this, but it's almost better just to show here on the screen. And the front yard area would be the area that's basically contiguous with the front of the building all the way to the back of the sidewalk. So there would be a paving area here. Or here, that would be retained in some sort of landscaping, so that we don't actually have complete.
cross angle.
Yeah, and this would only, this 25% rule would only apply to lots that are wider than 25 feet. So in these examples, these are 30-foot wide lots.
Yeah, and Mike, regarding that, the wording in the proposed, it says on parcels wider than 25 feet, at least 25% of the front yard shall be retained as landscape or xeriscape. And could that be, the wording tightened up a little bit? Like on parcels where the front yard is 25 feet or wider? I mean, so that at least there's a demarcation point rather than, it just sounds general to me.
It would be 26 feet or wider.
Okay, so is that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just to clarify that,
Yeah.
because it seemed vague.
So, and just to clarify, and so we completely understand what we're talking about, lots that are 25 feet or less would not be subject to the
They could be
landscape
paved
requirement.
all the way
They could
across.
pave,
Right.
exactly, and they can park their car any way they want to in that area, so long as the car is not overhanging the city sidewalk, which is of course a violation of the city's,
Okay, my question is then, is this is just for new stuff, or let's say this, or people right now, let's say this past January 1, and I have a house with a piece of grass, and you said if 25 feet, I could get it paved over. People can come in and ask to do that?
yes, once the law was enacted.
Yeah,
So-
after January.
So continue.
Yeah, whenever
So
this goes.
continuing on the same area, what about, we have issues with runoff into the storm drains, and paving increases the runoff into the storm drains. Could we include, I know there's some wording about pavers or things that fit the profile of the rest of the property, but should we or could we include something that would say that the additional paving should be permeable so that it doesn't add additional runoff into the storm drains, because that actually adds a problem.
And, we've actually had this discussion internally in the city staff level. Part of the issue that we have there is, though even that's an excellent idea, is that permeable paving is an engineered installation, and if we were to require that, it would require a lot of excavation work and a whole system be installed. And the issue with that is that it's costly. And what we were trying to do here was make it so that it was something that is easily complied with. Because presently, if we didn't do anything, people could, just in the examples that we showed you, they could continue to do that. So we wanted to develop a regulation that was reasonable, that people could comply with without having, that having to spend a lot of money on an engineered solution, because permeable pavers do require that.
So when they are deciding to pave over that portion of the lot, they still have to apply for a permit to do it?
They do need an encroachment permit, yes.
And recommendations would normally come back from the city as far as what they would do as far as the materials and
Right,
and style and so forth?
exactly.
I think this proposed regulation is very much appreciable. I like this kind of proposal. This is then a cat and mouse regulation where people sometimes park there, although they're not compliant. You know, my point is, you know, if you're thinking of Daly City, especially in the so-called northeastern part of Daly City, it's the horrible parking space problem
Right.
compared to Serramonte or because I don't know if you have studied about the so-called parking garage usage of these people. How many are using it? How
Right.
many are not using it?
Yeah.
That is why they keep every time you have a proposal here, a project, they keep on complaining about parking space. But actually, they are the problem itself because they don't use the parking garage they're being given.
So
That's why
this
I-
creates
I-
more.
This
I
parking.
normally-
it does
I
create more
normally-
parking. It's,
Drive around these areas, northeastern part of Daly City. Parking is horrible. Yet you can see some people there. There's so many open spaces there. It's not being used. So more or less, if we can probably make an inventory of this, so more or less, we can try to be more rational about so-called parking problem, especially in that area.
That's a very good point.
And also, I would like to say that, yes. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Well, the point is, this should be, if not, the city council can propose an ordinance about this. That we have to mandate that the parking garage must be open up. Just make an inventory about this. Because people there, in this, especially the northeastern part of Daly City, they are not using the parking garage. They're using this as storage or a room or whatever. I can say this sincerely because, you know, I know a lot of people who are using this as a place.
I think the council committee was mindful of that when they are.
And yet they keep complaining to the city every time we have a development project here. And yet they're the problem itself.
So this is moving in the right direction.
That's what I'm saying. I am amenable to this proposed regulation.
Right.
Also, Mr. Chairman, if we can probably be also lenient about this, if they can propose in the regulation that in the evening between 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning, if they can park in the sidewalk, especially in the evening, because especially in this so-called area, northeastern part, every time they keep on complaining, they receive ticket because of blocking the sidewalk. If anybody in the city council can propose this, they can be given an allowable time between 8 o'clock in the evening up to 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. They can park there without having hassle of getting the ticket.
We can pass that recommendation on to the city
Yes.
council. I
Yes,
don't know if
please.
there's a state law, though, that they can.
The
It's an
Americans
ordinance,
with
yeah.
Disabilities
that's
Act
true.
would not permit
ADA.
us to,
Block the sidewalk.
that's a state law, the
So
city
that's why
council,
if we
sorry.
can rationalize this, because this is a problem really here in this area. Sometimes I go around, especially in the evening, because I have some friends that are living. But it's really horrible.
Yeah.
Compared to Westlake, you can all Serramonte or St. Francis, you can park a lot of parking spaces. But this area, you cannot even pass in the
And
middle.
For what it's worth, we are fairly lenient on allowing people to occupy some of that area so long as the passable sidewalk meets the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. But we do allow, in limited instances, we do allow what appears to be the sidewalk to be used for part of a parking space, so long as
just
that
over the
minimum
curb,
clearance
yeah.
is maintained.
Well,
So-
living on East Smoky, which I do, right there, and I have people up the street that take advantage and park on so that the handicap can get by. And I, for one, report them. Because this is a terrible thing for seniors. So I live there, and I would like to eliminate park in front of the garage, it just have to be 1 foot over. Well, I'm just 1 foot over.
So
And wheelchairs
appreciate
can't-
if staff, just carries the recommendation or
Yeah,
request.
this is just for discussion purposes.
Yeah,
Probably
very
we can look at this. Because people here keep on complaining about the parking situation here in Daly City, although there is none actually, compared to San Francisco or some areas.
So this slide encapsulates what we're proposing, allowing expanded driveways, retaining 25% of landscape on parcels that are wider than 25 feet or 26 feet or greater. Design requirements, so we would like to see that the concrete, receive some coloration or some design, some aesthetic treatment so that we're not just looking at just stark white concrete pours. Because if you drive around some of our neighborhoods, when a green area is replaced by concrete, it is not attractive. So we do need to see that. And then the proposed code change does have a one-time exemption. So we would inform people who have existing driveways that don't meet our regulations that they can apply for a one-time exemption, which we would grant them automatically. If they fail to do that, then they would need to comply with our regulation the next time they come in for a building permit over a certain valuation to be set by the city council. We're thinking probably $50,000 valuation. We want to make sure that the valuation is a certain amount so that it's a big enough job that they're doing on the site that saw cutting out the landscape triangle and planting plants there is something that's feasible. So we're not trying to make regulations that are just infeasible to people so that they don't come in and get permits, because we've already got somewhat of a problem with that. We don't want to make an existing problem worse. So
You're not gonna have a curb cut for, they're gonna go up on.
no, we're actually considering.
Asking because of the,
That's a good question.
one car here,
Yeah.
one car there, the guys are gonna come over the curb.
We probably would allow apron expansion so long as it doesn't decrease the area
Okay.
that's available between this and the next apron to less than the number of parking spaces that exists, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it does, because they're gonna come over, keep going over the curb.
That's
and,
a city standard drawing change, though. We don't need to make a zoning
No,
ordinance.
no,
for it.
okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's
Okay.
front yard paving in a nutshell. So there are a number of other amendments that we're not going into. We're proposing some changes to the fence regulations. Interior common areas would be required. We've had proposals for people to convert their living room to bedrooms, and we think that's probably not a good idea. It's probably a good idea to retain some common areas so that, again, preventing people from turning homes into apartments. And we do see that. The allowance of secondary entrances on the side yard. We really want if people really want to have accessory dwelling unit or a second, we want them to apply for that. We're trying to eliminate this sort of cat and mouse game that we play with people where they say, oh, we're just going to do rooms downstairs with a wet bar, but it's really a second unit that they want. And the permitting differences aren't that different now. So we're limiting secondary entrances if you're proposing a secondary unit to the rear elevation of the home. So that's something worth noting. In new construction, including rooms down construction, we're requiring an area be set aside for trash and recycling bin storage. Part of the reason people don't use their parking space is that they have these large toters that everybody has been issued, and there's nowhere to put them. So we are going to require that if you do some remodeling in the downstairs of your home, or you propose a new home, that you have an area to store those toters in.
But that's on new projects.
Yep. that's
What
new.
about the old, like this slide on the left?
And we would not go to people who aren't proposing anything and tell
No,
them.
no,
they
I'm
have
saying that situation, that's code enforcement, the left one.
Oh,
One-
it could be.
Yeah,
It could be, but basically, if they applied for a permit to do new construction, then that would be visited as an issue.
okay,
Exactly.
but they
Yeah.
can't, what I'm just saying is, that left side is what I'm asking about, and there's a car parked in there, and because the car's in there and there's another unit in the back, they have to put those barrels in the house.
Well, right, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, the reason for this is for an item that's actually not checkmarked. It's using garage doors as pedestrian entrances. So this garage door has two separate pedestrian entrances, and so upon the city reviewing any plans for construction, we can require that be reverted back to a functional garage door. So that's something that we run into, and again, people say, where does it say in the code that I have to do that? So
It will.
after this, or if this is adopted,
Gotcha.
we'll have a section to point to. A wet bar allowance, we allow a 5-foot wet bar. We limit appliances to basically a 5 cubic square foot refrigerator in a wet bar. We do have people that legitimately want to have wet bars, and we're proposing to continue allowing those, but they'd be subject to some restrictions, of course. The proposed changes are exempt from CEQA. And we're recommending that the Planning Commission forward the revisions to the City Council for approval.
So, next item would be to open the public hearing, but before we do that, if any of the people who joined us after we started would like to speak, could you please fill out a speaker card, or if you're not interested, then you don't have to worry about it. No? Okay.
You might have something to say later on.
If you wouldn't mind filling out a speaker card, because we'll need to call you up if you would like to speak. They're right by the entrance, and just,
We're not sure we have anything to talk about yet.
well,
We represent Southern Hills, which has unique,
I understand. So if you could do that, that would be great. They're right by the entrance, just fill that and bring that up so that we can give you that opportunity.
I think there's no card.
What, there's no cards?
Oh,
You said
card,
there were a few.
card.
Yeah, there's cards there.
Oh, there is still. Okay, I thought there's no cards.
No. It's been there. I'll wait for them.
We did mail notice of these proposed revisions or emailed to all the homeowners associations.
Is this going to be an amendment to the ordinance?
It would be an amendment
So
to the
it's the
city
city council
municipal
that
code.
Correct.
City council.
Okay.
Correct.
Another point, Mr. Chairman, is for the new construction of buildings, do we have any issues about that? For the parking problem, you know?
What again? I'm
For the
sorry.
new construct building, for the new projects,
Mhm.
do we still have some issues about it as far as parking is concerned?
Uh,
Or
if
in
you're-
relation to the ordinances?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about new larger buildings, we've proposed that the parking requirement for apartments and condominiums be aligned based on bedroom count.
Well, that's how we've seen like that machine for rotating cars.
That
and
is,
things
that
like
is,
that.
I think
Yeah.
that's the best so far, huh?
The,
That's the modern.
Mm-hmm.
That is-
No, we allow that.
It goes
Thank
to-
you.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So, at this point, we'll open the public hearing, and this is your opportunity, if I call you up, if you'd like to say something about what has been proposed. So, Hardy, would you like to come up and make your comments? Hardy Prentice, Southern Hills Homeowners Association, or Residents Association.
Tim and I represent the Southern Hills Association. He's the president, I'm the vice president.
Okay.
So we received the letter, thank you. We have unique issues in that the lots are fairly large. And there was quite a to-do when someone tried to subdivide one. The thought is the construction would go on for years with all the disruption and so forth. And we'd have to think carefully about that and like to be notified. In terms of paving, those of us that are no longer 14 need wider spaces beside our cars. I'm a Vietnam vet with some disabilities. And we widened our concrete a bit, not enough to have additional parking. And we didn't pave the whole thing over. But I'm interested in ADA things, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because certainly parking across the driveways or the sidewalk is an issue. So just if you think of any things that we can take back to Southern Hills, again, the large lot size, most of them are fairly wide. Most of our houses have side-by-side garage doors, so there is a fair amount. I have noticed an increased number of people that have been paving the entire front, and I share the concerns about runoff and aesthetics. So that's my thought.
Okay, well, thanks, Hardy.
Thank you.
Tim, did you want to add anything to that? Tim Canner?
Yeah.
Sure,
Canner.
guy that has Connor's name probably get all upset. Southern Hills, as Hardy mentioned, we're a little bit unique. One of the things that's happening now, people will come on and park next to their house, but they're they're clear of the sidewalk. So that's really, it doesn't look well, but I happen to be in the real estate business, and I view this a little differently than a lot of people do. You don't have a parking problem, you have a housing problem. Everybody attacks this from, where am I gonna put my car? Where are you gonna put your kid? Where are you gonna put your grandchild? We live in a neighborhood now where there's a lot of adult children still living at home. And some of them get married and still live at home, and they have families, and they have cars. But the problem is where you're gonna live. I don't know if this is an appropriate place or not, but we should look more at public transportation. We get 2 buses in the morning and maybe 3, and the same thing in the evening. So if somebody really wanted to take the bus, they have to call some special service. They can't take Samtrans. I had a discussion with one of the council members once, and he says, Samtrans says it's all about the fare box. Well, we sort of resent that a bit because we're Southern Hills, and there's a district below us that's still in Daly City gets a free shuttle to BART. We don't get that. If a senior citizen where we live has to get around, they have to call and pay for transportation, where another neighborhood gets it for nothing. If you ask my opinion, I'll give it to you.
No, that's okay. I mean, Tim, the point, again, this was for a zone amendment.
Right.
But that's an important topic that needs to go to city council to have a voice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
related to that, if you are representing the
Southern Hills.
Southern Hills, that's a good point. But if you can probably make a position paper and address that to the city council, to the city manager, then probably make a position paper on that. Because those are the issues that sometimes we want to hear. Because you represent the Association of Southern Hills homeowners, I presume.
On a one-to-one basis, just about everybody in the city council has heard us.
Well, you can try at least more or less that there is, that you have a paper, position paper,
Yeah.
than nothing at all.
Yeah,
That's
we
what I'm
thought-
saying.
We got the notice here, we thought this was a party, otherwise.
You bring the ice.
Okay. Thank you. So if there's no further speakers, we'll go ahead and, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the recommendation that the planning commission adopt the findings as outlined herein, is there a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And a motion to affirm the environmental assessment?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And a motion to approve zone text amendment ZC 10-16-12395 as described in the staff report and with the additional wording changed as suggested. Is there a motion?
So move. Oh, second. Second.
Okay. May we have a roll call, please?
Satori, Tallarico,
Yes.
Edelman,
Yes. So the motion or the amendment carries. Are there any staff communications, public appearances? No? Okay, acquisitions, vacations, all that good stuff?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
on January, I'll be out of town.
okay,
I'll be in Asia.
okay.
And secondly, I would like to honor in memory of Mary Grace Gatchalian Marcos, who died very recently. He is a resident of Ardendale Drive, Daly City. And we would like to, in behalf of the commission, extend our heartfelt condolences to the family.
Absolutely.
And thirdly, Mr. Chairman, I would like to congratulate those won the recent election. I hope they can perform well based on their performance in campaigning. I hope they can do that as their way of doing it to the city, the way they campaign. And lastly, I would like to congratulate the economic community development for outstanding job for this year, and we have a lot of development. Plus, of course, with the guidance of our deputy city attorney here. So congratulations, and also to your city manager. I would like to say congratulations to her for a job well done in the city managers. He's the vice president of the Association of City Managers in America. Thank you very much, and happy holidays to all of you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Also, so I also had a request to close the meeting tonight in remembrance of the 36 people who perished in the Oakland warehouse fire. So to remember them, we'll close the meeting. Okay. Thank you.